I did start it, right?
Cool. The partnerships channel is growing a lot, by the way.
I know it's popping off. We've been getting a lot of like organic growth, surprisingly. I feel like
Great.
the more partners we get that are just like talking about partnerships, like the more partners we get organically. So
Yeah.
it's been like a nice, like slow growth, but in a good way.
Yeah.
We're kind of split between like, should we go get a bunch of partners or should we like nurture the partners that we have? And I think we've pretty foolishly like leaned into the like build stronger relationships with partners.
Yeah.
What about you guys? Are you partnering with more companies than default?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something I'll talk about today is like we implement like a ton of data tools and I've implemented a ton in our past. And so for us, I always want it to be a win-win for our clients. Like I want to do the things that are the cheapest, the most effective, and can like last and like the companies actually exist after a few years. And so um, for me, it's great because I all these tools that I implemented for 5, 6 years, I'm like get to meet the CEOs and have give them some tips on how to grow and what our pain points are, and then we get great support. And so yeah, we're building out our partnerships as well with some really solid vendors. Um,
Interesting. It's like partnerships is a mode that's like newer to me, but I know it's been around for a bit, but it seems like especially now, like the whole cold outbound thing, like it's still good, but it doesn't have the same effect as it used to in terms of like acquisition. So it feels like now everyone just wants to go the referral route. Like for
yeah,
even looking for jobs or like looking for new tools, like I don't just go to the internet, I just ask other people like what they're using.
yeah. So it's a lot of referral based. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and kick off here and then we can just let people trickle in as they go. Welcome everybody. Hey Jesse, thanks. We are live. I have this like 50-inch screen, and sometimes I just forget that there's like the other half of my screen. But anyways, thanks everyone for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A chat, and we'll make sure to get to them towards the end of our webinar today. Just to go through some quick agenda, we're just going to go through some intros, talk quickly about what default is, and then we have some different topics that we can go over. But Tom and I actually have decided to make this like a little bit more open-ended. So if there is anything that you guys want to discuss as we're going through, we're definitely happy to like pivot and talk about things that are relevant for you. So let's do some quick intros. Utom, I actually know personally, I met him a couple of years ago. We both live in Austin. I met him at a founders dinner.
Yeah.
So it's been really cool to watch him build his agency. We actually had started agencies, consulting firms at the same time, and then I've obviously pivoted and gone back into working in the startup world. So, Utam, do you want to give a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. Yeah, and it's really great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Utam. I run Brainforge. Brainforge is a data and AI consultancy. We help several companies across e-com, SaaS, health tech, uh, build scalable data analytics and implement AI. A lot of our work these days is focused on growing revenue. So for e-commerce, that means really the product profitability equation. So being able to help you build more margin from your products, and lower shipping costs, increase your marketing efficiency, all that our shovel is data. And so we try to bring the best data warehousing and analytics, methodologies in order to have you take advantage of that. I've worked in several firms doing this exact, job from in every single role. And so for me, it's really fun now where we get to do this across several companies, but also build an amazing team. So we have a great worldwide team of data engineers and analytics engineers that help to bring analytics into companies. And these are companies that could be big by revenue standards, but really have low visibility into how their products are working. And so it's really great for us to come in, bring them the best tools, and then see that their meetings are now run, with data as like a first-class citizen. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I always find it really interesting when people that are working in industries that aren't like specifically go to market pivot into go to market. Like you obviously started as a like a data engineer and have moved into go-to-market analytics. So I always find like listening to you talk about go-to-market, I always pick up a lot of different things that I wouldn't from like a typical person that spent their entire time in go-to-market. But for a little bit of background on myself, I started my career at Copy AI, built out the sales org there. I started in sales and then actually pivoted into solutions engineering, did a little YouTube university, taught myself some coding, and it ended up kind of sticking in my brain. So I started a company in 2023, turned into like an AI RevOps consulting firm. And then at the end of last year, I ended up joining Default full time. So now I'm running growth engineering and partnerships over here. So just trying to have these webinars on like a monthly basis so we can bring in some of this talent that we have. We have all of these awesome partners that view go-to-market so differently and have really interesting insights. So just trying to make sure everyone has the same information here. Um, Jumping in, I just want to do a really quick, what is Default? So basically, Default is a go-to-market orchestration platform. It's interesting, a lot of tools have started in building in one area, like you could build a calendar or you could build a scheduler, but instead we actually started in the orchestration piece. So typically people, get all of these different tools and then have to string them together. So when I was running my consulting firm, like a lot of what I was doing was stringing together different tools and then essentially managing like fixing them when they broke, which became, more and more the more complex of a tech stack you build, the more time you have to spend like kind of taping it back together. So for default, we ended up building the orchestration piece first, making sure everything, all of the data is able to pass from one platform to another really smoothly. And then we're kind of slowly building out all of the different pieces around that. So just like a quick summarization. And then for Utam, so you started, like I said, you started your career in data engineering. Do you want to kind of walk us through like from the very foundational levels of like what is data and go to market? For me, for
Sure.
like the beginning parts of my career, it's just not something I had considered. So walk us through like what are you looking at when it comes to data?
Yeah, so for me, data is really for everybody that works in go-to-market. I think these days people are they understand that there's a dashboard in their world that they need to look at to understand comps or understand how they're effective they are. But really, that wasn't the case, really just a short time ago. A lot of what's been the theme in a lot of go-to-market teams is using data to basically see not only how effective your current strategies are, but where the puck is going. And so really what that amounts to really basically is just, are you using data to make decisions, right? Are most of your conversations with colleagues or in meetings starting from looking at a dashboard and saying, hey, we noticed that we've been more effective through one channel. How should we pivot our resources and process towards that? Ultimately for us, it's common for data folks to just say, cool, we'll throw together a dashboard. Here's all the data and sort of end the story there. But for me and our team, I tell them that we don't win until the client makes more money. Our tool to do that is data, right? And so for us, we try to make sure that you have all of your data in one place, that you can easily see your performance across channels. You can see what initiatives you're taking and how those things are changing week over week, month over month, and then really where to invest. But a lot of our, we've had success with several clients where not only are they open to actually bringing this data into a single place, modeling it, but they actually tend to bring it to their meetings and actually use it to run executive meetings, team meetings, planning, forecasting. Otherwise, if you don't have that goalpost, you're really not going to get where you want to go. Without having that goal in mind, setting goals and being able to make sure that every day your team is progressing towards that is really, really difficult. So this is everything from just understanding which leads are coming in the pipeline, who they're getting assigned to, what data, how long it's taking from stage to stage to stage, and then how that time even affects, your close rates. This is a huge problem about teams where they look at, hey, a lead came in, it's going to take maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks for that to actually get actioned on. Conversation happens, a follow-up, an SOW. Everybody in sales knows it's about momentum. In my business, I've had to move from data engineering to sales. So I know it's all about momentum. It's how fast can you get a prospect on the phone to understand that they do have a problem. And for us, it's an analytics problem. understand that we have the tools to solve that, and then move them into the next stage. Commonly, you're using a mismatch of tools. Your team isn't trained on all those tools. Those tools are changing all the time. And so default, a tool that kind of consolidates that is ahead of the game on integrations, allows you to try to shrink that timeline of moving, a prospect to a closed one.
Definitely. So for earlier stage companies, like even for us, as we were thinking about how should we start building like the data observability piece or like reporting, we had done it retroactively after building out, go to market, like throwing stuff at the wall. And then we're like, okay, well, how do we measure things, right? So when we're looking at like an earlier stage company building a data reporting for the first time versus like a more legacy or like larger enterprise company worrying about data, like how does that differ? Maybe where do we start in the data world and then where do we go once we're like a bit more established?
Yeah, this is a great question. So for us, you don't have a business unless you have money coming in, you have a working product. So if you don't have a successful business at minimum, there's nothing to measure, right? And data is not going to be the reason that you can't cross that chasm. So a lot of our customers that we try to have are people that are at your stage where they have a successful product, they're in market, they're getting data, and then right now what their challenge is how do they move faster, right? Commonly, you may have a monthly or like a quarterly planning meeting. Someone on your team has to cobble together all these things, and then everybody's sort of like, I don't think that number is right, but like let's go for it, and let's just say, okay, cool, we want to hit 50% of that. Those are the kind of situations and ambiguity you want to really reduce, right? On a daily and a weekly basis, you want to know how many customers, how many leads are coming in, how many of those are converting to customers, and then ultimately what they're doing with your product, whether that's a product or a service, and how they're being retained. That is, for me, the full funnel of the customer journey. And part of this is moving from intuition to insights. Great people in business, you have a feeling, you know that you sort of have to head this direction, and you've built your company on those bets. But as you sort of start to hire more people and build teams, not everyone will have that intuition. And so data is really the common framework by saying, our goal is to move this number to this number. How are we coming together and doing that? And so part of this is really just making sure that you are using great tools. You're using tools with APIs, that all that data can get pulled into a tool like Default. But even more specifically, that you can partner with a company like ours or roll your own, where you're able to move all that data into an analytics warehouse. Commonly, we implement Snowflake, where you can land all that data in one place, build data models, start to join data from where leads are coming in to your active customers to your product usage, and then really get the sense to really start to see, what your whole customer journey looks like in your data. One of the things I have written here is really data quality as well, which is one of the most important things to have really, really great, rich enrichment data, segmentation data, and understanding how data flows through these different tools. Most companies, their operating system for sales is HubSpot or Salesforce, but you have Calendly or cal.com to get things in. You're using Apollo or Clearbit or ZoomInfo to enrich things like that. Of course, these are all tools that inside each of them, they'll say we have analytics, but none of them talk to each other. And so this is where you want to have a centralized place where that data can get joined together, and you can start to see how a lead is going from coming in to actually getting closed, and how long that's taking. Really, where that sort of amounts to the time is in bad data. If you have data that's not enriched the right way, if you have data that sort of a lead comes in but it never gets assigned, right? Those types of automations we're all used to basically saying like, who's taking this? Oh, this lead's been sitting there for 2 weeks. Why didn't we call them? Or, hey, we had a great first meeting with this lead. Like, what's the next step? Who's taking that? Oh, so-and-so's out of office. All of those things, happen to start to expand, the timeline. And so that's where a tool like Default really shortens that. And then on the back end, being able to measure that shortening and then understand, okay, how can we do that across all of our different channels? So that's really like the top two pieces there.
You said something that resonates so much, which is now that I'm doing like the RevOps growth engineering at default, finding tools that have APIs and like work together really well is such a necessity. Like I remember before I had learned anything technical and I was just running sales, like trying to find the best tools that just did the thing that I needed to do and then like pouring time into managing them and like learning the new tool and everything. And now when I look at building out a tech stack, especially from like a data perspective, there is no world in which I would ever use a tool now that didn't have an API that I couldn't push that data into another tool
Yeah.
because, every tool wants to like quote unquote own the tab, but being able to aggregate it all into a singular place and like put that data where your sales reps are living or like where the people that are using that data or need to see it can see it is so, so important. So from your perspective, you're working with people on the data side every single day. What are like the most common mistakes you're seeing when people are looking at building out a tech stack for data?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, this isn't just a lot of our clients or people that we work with, they think that this is just you hire a data analyst and so they get all of this done. But really building a rich ecosystem and what we consider like a data mart takes a lot of steps. You have to move data into one core warehouse, you have to model it, and then you have to make it available in a tool that everybody can access, right? And one of the points I have here, which is that sales and marketing executives may be looking at different sources of the truth, meaning sales may be looking at HubSpot analytics directly in HubSpot, marketing may be looking at Facebook or Northbeam directly, and then the executive team may not have access to any of that, so they're looking at a spreadsheet where someone exported that and sort of cobbled it together. So one of the things is making sure that everyone agrees on what a customer is, what a lead is, and then that can get codified in logic, and then that can get made available in a BI tool. So a lot of the mistakes that we see people make, we usually catch people in two different phases. One, they're really growing fast, very similar to default, where they've built a great product, they're growing, and then they're about to make like their first data hire, or they really don't know where to start. Do I need a head of data? Do I need a data analyst? Um, that's usually one situation. Other situations where maybe you brought on somebody that's like a data analyst, but that person gets jammed. That person is really, maybe you hire them just to sort of do Excel reporting, but they commonly complain that the raw data isn't clean or they're not able to get alignment on definitions. That's where you really need a cohesive data team. And commonly, this means hiring a head of data. This means hiring a data engineer, an analytics engineer, and a data analyst, right? The big companies can afford to do this. It's like a minimum, like a 500K annual bill just for the people and like 6 months to sort of get anywhere. This is where for us, we've worked in a lot of those situations and we sort of bring a lot of that talent on a fractional basis where we'll stand up all the core infrastructure and bring in people as you need it. So once we get all the data into one place, we then focus on modeling, implementing your core definitions, joining your HubSpot data to your Zendesk data, to your product analytics, and then making that available in a dashboard. So commonly we find people in those two places where they're looking to make some vendor decisions, but they're sort of caught in like, do I have to hire people for this? Do I bring on this tool that says it could solve all of this? And like, what's the next step?
That's such great insights. I think I want to say it was like 5 months ago I had called you after I joined default and been like, hey Tom, we need to track data to figure out where to like put more marketing spend. What do we do? And you were like,
Yeah, that's how it happens, right? But you like for a long time you can run without it. But let's say you want to have a data room for investors. Let's say you want to start to measure your sales force and who's more effective, how are they closing leads. Like
mhm,
you really do need something here. I mean, it's hard to run a business on my gut instinct when you're trying to scale it up.
mhm.
So
So for the companies that don't have, you're like, it will take 500K in 6 months to get it up. For the companies that aren't ready to do that yet, maybe they're like taking their first steps into like, what's the first tool we should get, maybe? What
yeah.
is the like main tool that you're recommending that could track some of those like key go-to-market metrics?
Yeah, so one piece is to really look at all the tools you're using and make sure they have like rich APIs. Um, right. So that's a key piece. The second thing, even before bringing on a tool, it's just to make sure that your company agrees on its core definitions. Like, what is closed won? What is a marketing qualified lead? And does every team agree with what that means? Right. So that's something we commonly do with folks is like a KPI workshop where you have definitions. Where does this data coming from? How do we know that? How do we know what the metric is defined as? And then in terms of tools, it's again, it sort of depends. I think for some companies where you know that data is going to be really, really integral, um, there are tools where like Snowflake, where you want to land everything in a single data warehouse. That's probably the first place I would start is to make sure you have a data warehouse that everything can land into. What you're going to see is if you have a tool like HubSpot, and you have a tool like your internal application data with your users, you're not going to find a tool out of the box that's going to connect those things together. So you're going to want to land all that data into one place, and Snowflake is a really, really great place to do that. After that point, it's really, you can make a couple decisions. You can use a tool like dbt to model a lot of that data, and we'll sort of show an architecture diagram here in a sec. Or you can just bring on a simple BI tool, right? There's some really, really easy, cheap, really cost-effective ones. There's also some really expensive ones like Looker and Tableau that you can rely on. But then you want to start visualizing your data, and you want to not do this across the whole business, right? One of the key things that we try to do is you find a squad or a team that they really, really want to use data, and you have champions who will kind of be able to deal with some of the like issues that you start to deal with. Access control, hey, this metric is a little bit wrong, or we need to change the way this looks. And then really nail, okay, that they're able to run their weekly or monthly meeting with your report shared like on a screen. Then you're able to say, cool, by that point, you will have built a lot of core infrastructure that can get reused across many other teams.
Mm-hmm. So for teams that are looking to like set up data, especially on the go-to-market side, what are you looking at where you're like, this is like quote unquote good data versus what is like bad data?
Yeah, so I think the next slide actually has this exact piece, which is a great tee up. Um, yeah, so part of the thing you'll notice if you bring on a data analyst or if you poke around, what your data looks like for your company, is that it all starts with the tools you're using. As a data engineer, I'm not going in and entering things in cells and like changing things. That all comes from the tools that you're using. So making sure that your CRM has really up-to-date information, that information is accurate, right? And that it has all the necessary dimensions that you need, whether it's where they came from, the source, like tagging them to a given segment, doing enrichment, using a tool like Apollo or ZoomInfo to bring in data on where their headquarters are, like what revenue region they're in, and then making sure all of that is in there. That data is all going to flow down. And so if that data in your core tools that you're using to action, like a HubSpot, doesn't have that information, it's really going to be hard downstream. So one thing is just making sure that all of your records have everything you need, where they came from, who it is, and then also who you're assigning it to, right? So who's the owner of this, and then what happened. So for leads that came in and have already been acted on, you want to understand who acted on it, what was the outcome. So there is some like data hygiene stuff that just needs to be part of you and your employees' workflows, which is, hey, when a lead comes in, you have to go into the tool and do XYZ. When a lead closes, your job is to go do XYZ. Part of kind of the forcing function of this is not just, hey, keep data up to date, but when you pull up your KPI dashboard and someone's like, hey, that's not accurate, you should be able to tell them it's probably because you didn't update your stuff in Salesforce, right? And that's the forcing function. That's the ultimate feedback loop. And then ideally, again, for a sales team, you may want to do compensation packages based on this data. And that's really, really important to have. Again, if people are going to get paid based on their close won rate in a certain segment, you're really going to want to make sure that they keep that up to date. And I promise you, if you tell them that they will. So these are a couple of the pieces that we sort of look at as like good or bad data.
That's a really interesting idea. Making KPIs around actually updating data. That's like the most legacy issue, getting sales reps to actually update
Yes.
Salesforce, right?
Yeah. But again, if you run a meeting based on the data and everybody's like, hey, this is wrong, it's often not the data person's fault because they're here to just take whatever comes in and then build, the reporting. And so data, they call it like garbage in, garbage out. And
Mhm.
so really it's important that your source of truth, which is you're going to be your CRM, is going to be your marketing platforms, your ad platforms, is going to be your website information. You want to make sure that all of that has all of that data really enriched because all of that's going to flow downstream. And most likely, if you're missing data, it's going to be because of one of those issues.
Yeah, I think we're looking at this from like a data engineer perspective, and for like sales reps or for go-to-market teams who like rely on this data, like the end result of it, who is, ultimately operationally configured by like the data engineer, those people are going to be living inside of like a Salesforce or a HubSpot, right? So when we're looking at like making sure there's like data integrity and hygiene inside of these CRMs, like what is the guidelines that you're giving to startups to make sure like the data in is clean?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, you just need to have an owner of the tool. So every tool needs to have like someone on the sales team ideally needs to be the owner of making sure that HubSpot data is up to date. This is not something that you should probably share with everybody. Someone should just be nominated to make sure that because ultimately their performance is coming out of that tool. So you don't want to be relying on anecdotally, yeah, we got more sales or oh, sales are down. In that moment, you want to say, cool, let's pull up the dashboard and look at that and understand and start to break down, okay, what segments are lower, what segments are higher. And so nominating someone for each tool to make sure that things are up to date is a really good suggestion. The second piece is as you build a data team, that data team is really going to be a partner to the executive and each of the sort of domain owners in your business to then help you share, hey, your data is stale here, which is the reason why your data in your dashboard doesn't update every week. And that's the sort of partnership. The data team is, apart from the executive team, is probably the only team in the company that sort of sees everything, but also probably the least enabled to affect anything, right? And so it's a big challenge, meaning we see that all the data coming from each of our sources, what's broken, what's not broken, what's coming from a Google sheet, what's like some data from like a legacy tool that we sort of strung together. So we see all the problems, but that team ultimately can't affect those metrics without a partnership. So what we try to do is we basically have a core stakeholder from every single domain where we say we're gonna meet with you and make sure that the tools that your team uses and the tools that you're measured by are up to date. And that's sort of the probably the first way to start doing it. And then once you start to build a data team, um, have them work directly in partnership with those leaders.
Hmm. I feel like for earlier stage companies, the data thing, it comes up a lot, but generally around fundraising, right?
Yes.
When you're really
Yes.
early stage and you're like, oh wow, we haven't tracked nearly enough of this, and you're like
Yeah.
trying to pull data from anywhere. So just trying to like get even the basics set up early on really like helps you set up yourself for success and like easier or like less fire drills when fundraising comes about. And I think before this webinar, you and I were even talking about like generally when you are investing in a tech stack for like data, especially in go-to-market, like you're not just gonna like try a tool and then pivot, right?
Yeah.
Really, you're gonna like choose a tool. It's gonna take a ton of time and resources to like build it up. And then from there, you're basically like building on those tech stacks or like those foundational tools. So when you're like thinking about building a world-class like data go-to-market engine, what are the like emerging tools that everyone deserves to give a little bit of attention to?
Yeah, so I think part of this is really looking for central source of truth that can pull data from each of these, various tools that they're using. So if you go to the next slide, I have a sort of a little bit of a section on like what's must have, what's nice to have, and then sort of what integrations you want to look like.
Mhm.
Um, so in terms of must have on the go-to-market side, you really want to have a tool that can own and measure, how leads are getting routed through all these different systems. Something comes in from Calendly, comes in from a booking form on the site. It then needs to get routed to somebody. That person then has a call. That call, there's some outcome. Hopefully they move to the next stage. An SOW needs to get produced. maybe a solutions engineer gets involved. So there are all these steps, and each of those people are in different tools sort of managing their day to day. So having something that sort of can sit in the middle and own that routing is really important, because ultimately your data team will pull from that to get all the different information about how a lead is moving through the funnel. The second piece is lead enrichment. So whether, again, it's Apollo, Zoom Inflow, Clearbit, there's a handful of tools now that you can use. You can do waterfall enrichment in a tool like Clay. Basically, you want to make sure that as soon as a lead comes in, you know as much as you can about them, and you can start to bucket them appropriately to the person that has the highest odds of closing, or at least they have the highest odds of success, whatever that is to your company. That enrichment, without that, you can't make a decision just based on someone's name and face on who needs to take that, right? So you want to know several different items. You want to know like what the company's revenue scale is. You want to know the industry. You want to know that person's title. That will help you then align them with a playbook, right? Okay, this person is a CEO of an e-com company. Great. Let's move them to our e-com folks that can really best show them case studies. Oh, this person is a data engineer. Okay, maybe we need to pair them with someone more technical on that initial call to share what integrations we have. Without that information up front, you couldn't have done that. And you don't want that to take a week or 2 weeks to go have someone manually go through their LinkedIn, find, okay, this person is a VP, and then enter that in. There's a lot of tools these days that do that automatically right when a lead submits, and there's an inbound request on your site. The third thing is a CRM. As we all know, like sometimes leads don't close. And so those people are right to keep in your funnel and make sure that you can continue to engage with them and continue to share how your product or service evolves. So having a really, really great CRM. Of course, there are a bunch of tools in this world, some incumbents, some new tools. And so really it's just picking one that has a really, really great API. This is probably a tool that you're going to use forever. And so making a really great decision here is crucial. The advice I got from a lot of people is just like go with HubSpot or go with Salesforce, but just like choose it. There's going to be pieces of it that may not work great for you, but ultimately a CRM should just store your customer information. It should be able to work with other tools to add enrichment. And then it should be able to be the source of truth for how a customer moves from a lead to close one, and also upselling on new services. So those are really, I think, like baseline need to have something there. In terms of nice to have, this is where, again, as I mentioned, I think analytics comes after being able to sell anything. So you want to make sure that you are able to sell, you have a product worth selling before being able to measure, okay, how can we start to speed that up? So having analytics, commonly you will find HubSpot, there's analytics tools in many of these tools across that you're using. The problem with that is you'll be able to measure just what's happening in that tool, but connecting it and seeing the full journey will be difficult. So this is where we recommend having a data warehouse, having analytics that can sort of measure the customer journey, understand what your most revenue driving customers are doing with your service, and how do we build more of those. And then the last piece is sort of AI agents. This is where we're spending a lot of time in the past year, which is how can we have AI sort of take the data, take what's happening with live leads, and sort of make decisions on the fly, right? So we don't have to wait for our sales team or our team otherwise to sort of act on leads. This is like an emerging field where we're sort of handing off some crucial but really low stakes decision making to AI so that we can save days. And it's been extremely fun, like building a company around these functions. And then on the right side, yeah, in terms of integrations, you just want to have great CRM integrations, great scheduling, and then great inbound, lead forms. Yeah.
Initially, when I was building out the go-to-market team at Copy AI, I had started out by trying to like build the most budget-friendly, stack possible. And I tried so many different CRMs, third-party CRMs kind of before we ended up just going with, I think we went with Salesforce or HubSpot. And now that I've built the whole stack, it's just so hard to come back from it. They're like tools that you like love and hate, at the same
Yes.
time, but it really is so hard to get away from them. Also on the AI agent side, we at default, we've just started kind of leaning into the agent piece, which is so interesting. Like the last, year of me running my consultancy, like so much of what I was building for companies on go-to-market was agents.
Yeah.
Super excited. We're gonna have some like in-product stuff. We just launched an AI like territory segment router, which will you can like in plain language explain like how you want leads to get split up, and then this agent will basically pass those leads through to the correct segments, which is really cool. Before you'd have to like build out, 20 different nodes to try to get it to go to the right place.
Exactly.
It just is a massive time saver for us. But also having so many of these tools just like building on AI to begin and like not having
Yes.
like an actual use case, I've definitely like leaned out from that game.
Yeah, part of like one of the things we do, and we use a lot of AI internally, but I try not to let our AI team work on anything until we have things documented, right?
Mhm.
Because if you just are saying, hey, I want to slap AI onto this process, you're gonna fail if you not don't know where you're trying to go or what really you're trying to affect. So again, as you just described, like what like building a 20 node router, what that takes, but having an AI agent that can actually take in all those components and make a judgment similar to how we would without sort of having like very specific if-then statements, that's taking a job, that previously someone would have to spend 10 or 20 hours building this and then maintaining that like sort of web of logic and basically handing it to an AI to make a judgment there, which is again, you just want to put your salespeople and your go-to-market folks in the right position and have all their time spent, with customers, learning about customers, not spent like building lead routing. You know,
Oh, you don't want to spend all your time with building lead routing
no, no.
either.
I don't think anybody got into like go to market and was like, oh, I want to just spend I want to spend 8 hours in HubSpot. It's like you want to spend 8 hours with the customer, or and that's sometimes like lost, I think. Is like part of this work is like getting your core people to spend more time with the customer, talking to new customers, and being able to understand your product and the industry better, less like, oh, I have to click through 5 different views to then update a field, then the update doesn't apply. And it's like it's like complete waste of time sometimes.
Yeah, I've become a really big fan of like building the bare minimum of tools that I need to get to the goal that I need to get to because I for a long time was like, oh, this is such a cool tool, like we should add it, and then just adds a ton of like tech debt, which we'll get into like
Yeah.
after this. But this is actually something I'm really excited to talk about with you, partially for default ourselves. But can you walk us through? So you spend a bunch of time obviously building out these like data warehouses for companies and for startups. So when you're like taking on a new client, how do you look at the like data architecture and what tools should be placed in there?
Yeah, so for us, when we talk to clients, we start with the objective, which commonly clients may think, oh, I want a sales reporting dashboard, I want a product analytics dashboard. But I try to understand like where are you trying to make more money, right? And commonly this is like, okay, we're launching a new product, we want to measure how it's being used. Oh, we don't have a good insight into who our most valuable customers are. We can't compare our Amazon business with our Shopify business, understand what's more profitable and where we should lean in more. That's what I need. The dashboards, the data, that's all secondary towards solving that problem. Commonly, data teams will get preoccupied with whatever needs to happen to get to the dashboard, but then the dashboard isn't the last mile. The last mile is does data get used in a meeting to make a right decision? And then can you measure that that decision actually affected revenue? But what you're seeing here is really like what the data stack that we commonly implement for folks. And it is, as I described before, which is you have several data sources. Again, this is what you can expect for, a pretty common e-commerce firm, that they're using something for customer service. They maybe have some data in Google Sheets. They have stuff across Shopify, TikTok. They're using marketing sources. All of that you need to bring into one place. And so we commonly implement Polyatomic. It's an ETL tool. Basically, you can consider it as moving data from one source to another. And so we take all of that data, we bring that all in as fast as we can, as fast as appropriate for budget. Ideally daily, all of that data lands into a raw data warehouse. And we commonly implement Snowflake. What you'll see in this is that data flows from the left to the right, meaning it flows from Polyatomic into a raw data warehouse. It then moves through several stages, gets transformed into what we call a data mart. A data mart, I'm not really sure the origination, but you can think of it like a place where anybody who's using data can just go and understand an entity, right? So if you want to say, great, I want to understand our customers. Well, we have a customer data mart. You should see a table that shows all of our customers, shows a table that shows all of our customers' revenue, customers' usage, right? And so you're not having to go into SQL, look at like a transactions table and then like a weird customers table, join that together, clean a bunch of stuff up. That's already done for you and made available in what we call a reporting ready schema, otherwise a data mart. And then finally, it's really exposing that to a tool like Looker or another BI tool. But additionally, as you sort of grow and you have data analysts, they will go directly into Snowflake and query this. They may pull some of this data out into Excel for modeling. And so making sure that that data mart is trusted, has the logic from all teams sort of combined into one. And you know that you can, when you have a question about, hey, I want to look at something that combines our lead data and understands for our leads that were brought in last month, how do they contribute to product usage in that same month? Okay, so that takes a lot of joins. It may take cleanups. You have to match customer names here with a weird customer name here. All of that work is done for you. That's not something you want the people who are tasked to analyze and make decisions on your data to be worried about. If you just go to the next slide, Caitlin, it's just a close-up view on this. This is really where we spend all of our time. Again, some of this is quite technical, but all you can think about is if you've worked in a company where, hey, where's the source of truth for our customer data, or where can I get a list of all of our leads and pipeline and the stage they're in, and export it. Of course, you can go into a Salesforce and export that, but if you know that you're gonna have to export 5 files, do VLOOKUPs, join all that stuff together, what our team does is basically make that available in Snowflake in a data mart. And we have several tools to do that. So Snowflake is our data warehouse of choice. We use a cool tool called dbt that helps us orchestrate all of this SQL logic that actually goes from your raw leads table, your raw opportunity stage, your raw product usage, join that together. We have several phases. And then ultimately all of that is version controlled in GitHub. The benefit is that we have a log of what changes are made. We also can then test changes. So let's say we're changing the definition of what an active customer is, or what a customer segment is. You can actually go test that whole logic change all downstream and actually measure the impact in your BI tools. So again, a little bit technical about how we actually implement this, but you can see that a lot of the companies you worked at that you probably describe as, hey, we had a great data ecosystem. I guarantee you it was built on and something similar to this. And it takes time. A single data analyst can't do this work. And it takes a few months to make this happen. But I don't think it takes 6 months or a year. I think this is something you can accomplish and really do team by team in just a few months and really see some great wins in just a few weeks.
We have a question, actually, an interesting one related here from Ahmed. He said, thanks for the session. Question for you, Tom. I work at a QR code company and we're using Looker for client-facing analytics. Is this a practice you'd recommend or not? Feels like tech debt, but I'm having trouble getting the exec team to prioritize a migration.
Yeah, so I think in terms of client-facing analytics, there's a lot of solutions. So the end solution, really the toughest solution is to build your own, right? You're using libraries and packages to build visualizations, build out the semantic layer, pipe data into those models and make that available for clients. It's not only that, you have to understand governance, security, making it available on the web. There's other tools. There's also just like picking something off the shelf, like Looker or Sigma, where they have basically white labeled their tools. So you can white label the tool, shove all of your customers' data in it, brand it towards yours. Of course, you're going to be sort of strung onto that, and you're not going to have the flexibility, but you may be able to get something out, in just a few months. with really a rich feature set that maybe your team doesn't want to recreate. It's really hard to build great data visualization tools. So part of it is understanding what are the specific things your clients need. Do they need a visualization? Do they just want APIs? Do they want a simple dashboard, or do they really want an enterprise scale analytics suite? And also pricing appropriately. So for the folks that do want something that's really large, it's making sure that you can get money out of that, and so that can fund some of the development work. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Cool. Makes a ton of sense. And also, I'm gonna go back here. Go back. You have all of these like raw data sources, and you're basically talking about how they get ingested into Polytomic and then into Snowflake. So maybe this is just like me not quite understanding, but how does the data get transformed in a way where when it gets into like final stages for people to look at, they're able to like actually see the data in, I'm assuming like plain language.
Yeah, so again, this is where like I'll just go one more layer technically. Um, Commonly, if you were to take all these data tables you can just equate them to an Excel spreadsheet, right? And so what happens when you want to join two sheets together? You need to do like an index match or a VLOOKUP. All of that, there's parallels in a data language called SQL. And basically all we're doing is applying that SQL from the raw data and then basically building it up onto a clean customer's data set. For example, you may want a customer's data set that not only has their names, addresses, it has the products they're using, when they first became a customer, the channel they came from. Just in that example alone, that touches like 5 or 6 sources, right? If you were to go into the raw stage, you may find a customer entity from 5 of these tools. So you need to apply SQL to then bring all that data into one, cohesive customer's data mart, which is basically like, cool, if I want the source of truth for customers, I want to make sure one, it has all of our customer data in one place, all of those different dimensionality that I mentioned. Second, it's up to date, meaning you use a great tool like Polytomic to bring that data in on a daily basis. Third is that you can backtrack the logic. And this is a common thing that's overlooked is a lot of teams, they'll have these SQL models, but they'll all be in one 1,000-line SQL code that like someone has in their computer that anytime you like pull customers from me, they run. There's no, you can't observe into that. You can't debug that at all. Meaning if you say, hey, Sally didn't show up in that report, or Sally actually showed up that she came through this channel when it was like a word of mouth referral, and that's what it says in HubSpot too. How do you actually find out what that is? You need this to be as code. So you can start to back up and see the journey from the actual final customer's data model and how a record from raw actually transformed into there. So this is all done via SQL, like long story short, just layers and layers of SQL that's all sort of governed and stored as code in GitHub.
That's a lot to digest.
It's a lot to digest. This is like the technical aspect. Sometimes you can't hide from the fact that these things are hard and they do take some time to do. But imagine you're doing that not only across customers, but across marketing, supply chain, customer service, profit. Like, you have to do this across every single stage. You have to make sure that all of those business lines are using the same data, and that all of those things are accurate. You need a system. Long story short, this is sort of our 80/20 on like what most people need. This starts to blow up as companies get bigger, more people get involved. But like this is really what we found as the most effective thing that we can get build in about a month for most of our clients, and get them to start using data and trust the data versus pulling something in an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, wow, that's like a pretty big time cut from 6 months. That's like music to my ears as a early stage startup person. Um, I'm interested like with the rise of AI, like a huge piece of what I was using AI for when I was building products was like vector DBs on top of LLMs.
Yeah.
So being able to like take these databases and have unstructured data and like
Yes.
pretty good responses out of it. How has AI like assisted in or like changed the way that you've looked at data, if at all?
Yeah, I think it actually just makes this way more important to have a single place of truth. All of your LLM systems will need to pull data from somewhere, right? And if you need to use the definitions of customers or these data marts to power those, you can't go directly to HubSpot or Salesforce and get those out. So you need a single place where all that data lands. At that point, and this is something that we're doing internally, where we land a lot of our own data, our Slack, our Zoom, into S3, and then we then move part of that into Snowflake. We then move part of that into Supabase for vector store, but you need a single place to land all that data. And then second is your LLMs will need structured data to make decisions. So if you throw 100 CSVs in there, you're gonna get a bad answer for the most part. And so you want to throw in a very cohesive like customers table with just the context you need. And there's a lot of really great tools that allow you to query databases, allow AI agents to query databases to get that information as you need it on context. For example, if an AI agent has to make a judgment on a given customer, it may then have a tool to connect to Snowflake, query Snowflake's customer database, and then actually pull in the right data at the moment you need it, instead of having to have like thousands of records in context.
Gosh, that's so much. I know when we were talking about setting up like data for default, you were like, well, how many records do you have? And I was like, I don't know, like a few 100,000. And you're like, oh, that's it? Like only a few 100,000? And that's insane. I know you were talking about the like scope of some of the customers that you're working with having like millions and millions of lines of data. But we have one more question over here, which is hospitals and health systems have complicated hierarchies. So a subsidiary may be a customer, but the parent may not. Can these challenges be overcome with automation slash AI?
Yeah, this is a really great data question. I mean, when we worked when I was at WeWork, we had a lot of clients that were subsidiaries of subsidiaries of subsidiaries. It's in real estate, right? So a lot of what we found is we really needed a great cohesive understanding of the org structure. Do you have a child account, a parent account, like an organization account? And these are all things that even before automation or AI, you should be well defined and have scenarios. So for example, you may have 3 different customers with 3 different hierarchies. List those down and understand, okay, what does your data model needs to be to support those? I think certainly you should use AI in that to assist you with figuring that out. But I think really this is more of a data problem where you need to understand what those hierarchies are, and how do you best build, data governance around those.
I feel like the larger the company, the more data governance becomes like a more pressing topic. How are you seeing like data governance within like earlier stage versus later stage? Like when does that start becoming a player for you?
Yeah, and in early stage, usually, again, I think about early stages, like for our world, it's like you just have a couple people that are poking at data every day. Everybody else in the company is doing their job. And so in that world, okay, everybody sort of has access to most things. But quickly, we try to set a foundation of data governance from the start. Commonly, you see this as role-based access control, meaning you have roles for every type of data role. So a role for data that moves in, a role for data that gets modeled, and then you can assign users to that role. The second piece is also understanding what is PII, and what data that you need to restrict from making it into the warehouse or needs to be hashed. Different companies have different restrictions for these, and so we work with those companies to understand that. The second piece is just having these different layers. So making sure your data doesn't all land into one schema and then it's all modeled in that same schema and then everybody has all access to all of that. We really believe in having these like raw, intermediate, and marts, different areas for these data models. And then depending on if it's sensitive data or not, we can sort of route things that way. So to start, again, you basically want to just make sure you can use data in any context first. As a company grows and you understand your requirements of your customers, the industry you're in, it's easy to layer that on. The problem is data governance is something that you really want to nail from the start. And commonly, if you just were to get Snowflake on your own and sort of start, you'll end up with just hundreds and hundreds of tables with no understanding of what's where and who owns what, and retention policies and PII and all of that. And you could have like legal action based on that. And so when we come into companies, whether they know it or not, we set up a lot of that. So eventually someone or ourselves hopefully will be happy that we did that when a company comes to say, hey, we need data governance. What are our policies? And we're like, great. From the jump, we've had data bifurcation. We have role-based access control. We can mask PII. Those are all things that we see around the corner for a lot of our clients, and we do out of the box. But it's something that's more of a concern, especially with AI. What tools are is your team using with AI? What data are you passing to it? Making sure that's all compliant. It's definitely like a huge topic right now.
Mhm. So not plugging in your company's information
Yeah.
from ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Well, let's just wrap up with one final question. You obviously have lived in this space for quite a while and seen it change quite a bit. So, looking at like the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years, where do you think the like capabilities of data will come into play for companies, or like how is it going to change?
Yeah, I mean, I think even in the last 5 years, all of this that you're seeing, none of the sort of core frameworks of having raw data, moving it using an ETL tool into a data store has changed. It's just the fact that a lot of this has gotten cheaper and a lot of this has gone faster, which is amazing for everybody that needs to use data. The second thing I've seen is that from even the smallest companies try to run their company data driven, meaning they're used to analytics to make decisions. That wasn't really common before. And so one of the things that we love is that these tools are becoming easier for our customers to adopt, and we can start to really try to achieve near real-time insights. Right? How can we actually make sure that you can see some of these things happening with your customers and take action on it within the day? The other piece is we want to spend more time with our customers doing things like goal setting, forecasting, predictive analysis. Those are really the things that, beyond just looking at historical data, you can really get an insight in your business that your competitors don't have, which is based on my historicals, based on the industry, like how can I project this forward and how can I make decisions based on that? Those are concepts that previously you would have to get very expensive data scientists to build really complicated models to do. That's now becoming available, a lot easier. And I do see that. I think in the next 5 years, those predictive and forecasting models are going to get a lot more available to do directly on your data without having to bring on like a machine learning person. The second piece is agents, so like AI agents, basically. So taking that data, taking and actually using AI to understand what the insights are, and then what action should you take? Okay, we need to go change our default configuration in a certain way based on what we're seeing. We need to go change our lead routing algorithm based on what we're seeing. We need to adjust our forecast based on what we're seeing. So it's going to be starting to rely on AI for some of those lower level insights. Um, and for anything on the pull from AI is really what's going to pull data forward, meaning everybody adopting AI is you're going to really need to have the right data on hand for context at the right time. If you've used ChatGPT, you know how easy it works when you have all the right things to copy and paste in. Like if you want to summarize a meeting, you have the meeting, you have what your notes are. But you also know that if you just tell it like a one-word thing, it's not going to get it right. And so we all know that anecdotally, but that's how it's going to work for companies where you want to have the right data at the right time to then provide to those AI systems to make the decision. Without that context that's rich, it's just not going to be able to help.
I've heard that trend a ton, the context piece of, have you heard of like death of a Salesforce?
No.
I was just reading something the other day that's talking about how these fields that are in like CRMs now, they're just like binary generally, or like,
Yeah.
you're tracking one singular attribute, and we're gonna move more towards CRMs with characteristics of like dynamic data,
Oh, okay.
like
Yeah.
context dependent. So super interesting. Definitely
Yeah.
a topic for another day, but
Yeah.
thanks everybody for joining. Today we were able to cover kind of the basics of data, how it plays into go-to-market teams, and the things that we should be tracking for that. So thanks so much for your time, Utom.
Of
I'll
course.
hopefully see you this week in Austin in the street.
Yes.
All right, everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email or connect with us on LinkedIn. I appreciate everyone's time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.